beyond just wanting to see diversity and inclusion thrive. Just as human beings, I think it's a disservice for us to just sit inside of our own, little boxes and never challenge ourselves to see beyond, our experiences and our views of the world. And so I am advocating strongly that we continue to prioritize education and training, that we also challenge ourselves to talk about the difficult topics as well, because that I think is, a lot of companies are nervous right now, right, to have these difficult conversations, but we need to have the difficult conversations because it impacts how people show up to work every day.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the All Inclusive podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Ciara Lilly, the Senior Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Diversified Maintenance, a leading provider of facility maintenance services across various industries in the US. We discuss the essential steps for getting inclusion right from day one and what every new leader needs to know to build an inclusive culture that lasts. Ciara shares her journey into inclusion work, the key qualities every leader should bring to the table, and practical tips for measuring impact and navigating challenges. Whether you're just starting out or looking to strengthen your approach, this conversation is packed with insights to set you on the right path. As always, before jumping into the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on your notification bell, and follow on your favourite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. That being said, let's jump in. Hi, Ciara.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. How have you been?
I've been doing well.
Thanks again for joining me today. So let's dive straight in there. Could you just start by sharing with our listeners a little bit more about your journey into DEI work? What inspired you? How are you here?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I actually started my journey into this space working with a minority-owned company, Environmental Service Systems, based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Actually, the second largest Black-owned company here in our area. And I started with the company May 29th of 2012. So I'm actually coming in that 12-year anniversary where I was responsible for business development. So I had responsibilities of working with companies that had diversity programs. And it was my entry point into this world of diversity and inclusion, supplier diversity. I had never heard about it before joining Environmental Service Systems. And my role was to leverage supplier diversity as a means to grow our organization. And spent 8 years doing that and found that I really enjoyed that work. I thought that work was it was amazing to me how much opportunity was out there for small and diverse-owned businesses working with either government entities or publicly traded companies, and I wanted to delve deeper into that space. And so when our sister company, Diversified Maintenance, approached me in 2020 and said, we'd really like to formalize a diversity and inclusion program, and would you be interested in leading that for our organization? While diversity and inclusion and supplier diversity are different, right? I felt like it would give me an opportunity to challenge myself in building a diversity and inclusion program, but I was also able to put supplier diversity under our D&I strategy. And so it gave me that, that ability to now be on the side of extending opportunity to small and diverse-owned businesses. And so I stepped into that role in 2020 and haven't looked back. So it's been a fun journey so far.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's a really inspiring journey there, Ciara. There's a number of different variety of paths I find that leaders take to get into this work. And kind of speaking of that as well, there is a common, I want to say, belief. Like, a lot of people do say that kind of anyone can do diversity, equity, inclusion, which I do, an element of that I do agree with. But what would you say are kind of the key qualities from your experience does somebody need to really be successful in this space?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. The first thing that I would say is empathy. Empathy, hands down. I think especially in this current climate, you have to lead with empathy, right? And when I say the current climate, we've seen here recently the attention, right, the negative attention, if you will, that a lot of diversity and inclusion programs are facing. And so with that in mind, being able to, apply empathy in how you approach this work is critical. It's also important because of, the different populations that you're working with. You want to be able to embrace differences and celebrate differences and be empathetic in how you approach working with people who have diverse backgrounds and bring a mosaic of history and experience and thoughts and whatnot into the workplace. And so for me, that's the top quality. The second quality I would say that kind of ties right into that is also having compassion, and this is compassion and grace. I would put together. And that is because a lot of companies are trying to figure out, and not just companies, individuals are trying to figure out how to do this work, right? How to do this, how to do it with integrity, right? And we're all learning. We're all learning in this. And so sometimes where, we're learning and we might, fall short in how we approach this work, we want to extend compassion and grace and give not just companies an opportunity to make it right, but also to give individuals an opportunity to make it right and to learn and strengthen their sense of awareness around why diversity and why inclusion are so important in how we approach work today. So those top qualities. And then I think one thing that kind of goes in line with that, you want to be a continuous learner. So this idea of how can I continue to grow in my subject knowledge? How can I challenge myself to embrace the full spectrum of what it means to be diverse, right? Because that definition expands. And so, someone who has a desire to, learn, a desire to challenge themselves and to apply what they learn into the strategies that they're building, I think are going to be critical in building robust and successful D&I programs.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I just want to kind of tack on to that point when you're talking about diversity and actually understanding that a little bit more. It's not just simply that kind of binary perspective on the two key ones, which is race and gender, which originally
Yes.
I think it's it's been a focus, which it rightly should. But there are other elements that make us up as human beings, and it's really making sure that you as a leader in the space understand that it's not simply just about race and gender. There are a lot more facets that make us up which we need to
100%.
focus on, and they all intersect, right? um
Yes.
so
100%.
DI is constantly evolving with everything that's going on in the world today. So with those key qualities, how do you keep yourself informed? How are you ensuring that your approaches to this work remain effective as we move through the times? Because it's going quick.
It is going quick and it's changing. It's, there's so much that's evolving, and strategies, are evolving in how you do this work effectively, right? But for me, one of the things that I believe has helped me in this work is that I plugged into organizations and resources that were going to help and have helped me really keep in tune with what's happening, and not just in the world of diversity and inclusion, but what's happening globally, right? Because we have to have that worldly perspective as we're doing this work. So we've joined as an organization several organizations that have responsibilities in this diversity space, be it responsibilities for advocacy for different diverse groups, or even responsibilities in helping grow these diverse businesses. We've put ourselves in the rooms to learn and to have a better understanding of what are some of those challenges that these various diverse populations are facing. And that has helped me to be able to take that information and build strategy around it. right? And so that has given us, a lens in which we're able to, view things and think about, how do we need to stretch ourselves to be more accommodating, right, to all of the diversity that we're trying to attract inside of our organization. Right. And then how do we make sure that we have also created a culture, right, that is going to allow for there to be true inclusion, right, inside of our workplace. And so that was key. The other piece that has been really instrumental is, I talked about continuous learning. And so, certainly we're plugged in and investing in different programs, be it certificate programs that are, specific to diversity and inclusion, or other executive management programs that we can tap into that will help us to be able to understand how we need to structure our business, right, in this current climate. But beyond that, it also gives us a better understanding of the do's, the don'ts, right, the best practices as it relates to diversity and inclusion. And I have to add equity in that conversation as well, because that's a key component, right? So how do we do this work, and what should we be mindful of as our workforce demographics are shifting, right? As we have new generations coming into the workplace, all of these things are happening real time. And so being plugged in and, being a student, right, to absorb all that information has been really helpful in building out our strategy and making sure that we're keeping this work effective, right, and that we're not just checking boxes, right, when we're doing this work.
Yeah. So how was that process, kind of establishing those additional resources and plugging into those additional organizations? How did you find it? What were the ups and downs in navigating that? Because there's a lot out there.
There are a
So
lot.
how was it?
Yes. So, one of the things that we did early on is we went to companies who had successfully built diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, right? And we went to those diversity practitioners and we asked for help, right? And so, in doing that, what we were able to do is build somewhat of a brain trust, right, of D&I practitioners that have met with me quarterly, right, since we started our program, to really extract what should we be doing, what are the best practices, what organizations should we be a part of, what publications should we be subscribing to. I mean, we really asked all of those questions to get, an understanding. So that helped, right, to save us time from having to go research a bunch of organizations, in all honesty. The other piece is, because we do have a sister company that is diverse owned, we were already plugged into some of these organizations through that relationship. And so it was just a matter of Diversified joining as a corporate member of those organizations, and going out and building relationships with those organizations to help us have a better understanding of how we could utilize those organizations from a corporate perspective, because we're not diverse owned, right? But we have a lot of the same programs that a lot of the larger corporations have. And so we went to those organizations and had conversation around, how do we make this investment? How do we make sure that we're getting a return on the investment, and what are all the benefits that we will have access to? And so that helped as well to kind of reduce that time that we needed to research and vet, right, before making some of these investments. And then we went to, organizations that we were aware of. We went to SHRM, right, to, for a HR focus, right, around DNI. We knew that was the association, of choice for, HR practitioners. And so some of this was, just a combined what we knew existing, what we gathered from those who had been in this space for a long time and had built robust programs, and then just things that we knew were going to be organizations that were going to help us catapult the work that we were trying to do.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad that you're bringing that sense of collaboration into the work that you're doing at Diversified Maintenance, because I think it's so important. And that's really, I think, is the key to a success, is to know when to ask for help.
Absolutely.
and to not put kind of your ego first and just be
Yes.
like, look, this is where we're at. Like, we
Yes.
think this is what we know so far about how we should be doing this, but what have you done? What's been successful? What's worked for you?
Yes.
And not simply an element of that also, though, I think is knowing when to apply which parts to what you're doing against versus other areas, if that makes
Yes.
sense, because it
Yes.
still needs to be authentic and relevant to what your organizational goals are,
Yes.
and what's going to work for your employees. Because I do think that sometimes it's like you mentioned earlier, it's like there isn't a rule book, there's not a guidebook here that says like, right, you need to do this at this step at this stage and then you'll be
Mhm.
successful. It is a continuous learning journey, and it's knowing when to fit what parts for your company at the right time
Yes.
and when. um and part of that is trying to measure out and know where you're at and how successful you've been in some of the initiatives and programs that you do put in place. So
Mhm.
I would like to hear a little bit from you about, like, how do you measure your success? Like, what metrics are you finding useful?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did at the end of last year that really helped with this, we brought on a third party consulting firm to help us, and we asked them to audit our DNI program, which I'll be honest, we're 4 years into our program, right? To have a third party come in and conduct an audit, right, was to some a little early in the process, but I advocated for it because I felt like in the spirit of true transparency and accountability, we needed that other set of eyes to help us ensure that we're on the right track. Because again, not only was this new to our organization, this embracing of diversity and inclusion is also new to our industry, right? And so we're almost, we've positioned ourselves as kind of the first in our industry to really be intentional about doing this work. So we brought in this consulting firm and we said, we want to lay out our strategy. We want to lay out everything that we've done, and we want you to give us your feedback. And they helped us and are continuing to help us build out what are the specific metrics in which you want to measure your program against. All right. And so that has been very, very helpful because we knew, we can look at some of the basic metrics. So we were looking at our workforce demographics to make sure that we had diversity, across all levels of our workforce, right? So typically in a lot of organizations, you see a lot of diversity at that entry level, right? And we wanted to challenge ourselves. We wanted to see that we're making progress across all levels, including our senior executive level of management, right? And so we were tracking that. We were looking at, age diversity, and making sure that, we were having an impact there because that's critical right now as, workforce demographics are shifting, as I've mentioned, and it's pretty dynamic, how quickly that's happening. We just talked internally in one of our DEI moments that we send out monthly about this is the first time in history we have all 5 generations working, together in the workplace. That's
That's
special,
huge. Yeah,
right? Yeah,
yes.
that's special. And so how do and so we were looking at that, and we were looking at, where we are, with an aging workforce, and how do we prepare for that? And so we were tracking some of these metrics. And then of course, we also, because we have supplier diversity built into our D&I strategy, we were tracking on that side, how many diverse suppliers were we working with, and, in what diverse categories, right? Are they women owned? Are they minority owned, veteran owned? We were getting really good data there, and how much we were spending in each category, right? And so those were the metrics that we had existing. And with the help of the consulting firm, they have challenged us to, look at it from a different lens and to add more metrics there, metrics around, our training. So, we had launched our D&I training program, and we're capturing, compliance with that.
Yeah.
But how do we expand that and start to really break down data, around how well we are training our team members, because that's a critical element in making sure that these programs are successful, right? And so they have and continue to help us really look at that and challenge ourselves and take it to that next, step where is how do we start to incorporate this into our incentive programs and how we evaluate performance within our leadership group. And so these are the things that we're talking about now, that, will help us continue to evolve. But what it ensures for me, and this is most important, is that we're doing this work with integrity, with transparency, with that level of accountability. We're willing to, put out, our playbook, if you will, with a trusted advisor to say, help us, be successful, because we don't want to be, 10 years into this program, look back and see that this really hasn't been relevant or impactful, for our workforce, right? And for our culture. And so we want to have that insight earlier, right? So that we can build our strategy that we know each year is customized based on what the specific needs are of our employees.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a fine balance, don't get me wrong, in terms of when you do this audit and when you kind of
Yes.
look at
Yes.
and like review where you're at.
Yes.
Because we do know that a lot of these programs and initiatives building that inclusive culture in a workforce, and making sure it's equitable and it's diverse takes
Mhm.
time. It's
It
not going to
does.
happen overnight, but at the same time, you do need to make sure that you know, one, where you're starting from and how far along that path you are towards the goals that you've set yourself. So I think there's a little delicate dance that you've got to do, and I don't disagree with you. I think the 4-year mark is a good time frame, considering the size of your organization as well. Like I think
Mhm.
you kind of need to, at least you need to stop somewhere and be like, okay guys, like we've done so much work, like let's just pause for a second and just have a review at where we're at right now, because
Yes.
you can't just keep it's like when you're planning a journey, like, and you've got to stop for
Mhm.
gas. Like everyone's got to stop for gas at some point. You're not gonna
Right.
you
Right.
can't drive hundreds and hundreds of miles and not stop for gas. You need to
That's
stop.
right.
So I think it's great. How was that, you advocating for that review? Because it sounds like there was a little bit of a pushback, which, I mean, with anything there's always some sort of pushback. I don't think you're
Right.
not going in the right direction if you don't have anybody that's going to be questioning what you're doing. What advice can you give to other leaders that might also be in the same space as you was, in saying that, what, right, we need to take a stop, we want to have a review? What tips would you give them in being able to kind of advocate for this?
Yeah, so the thing that was most important was going back to our original mission and vision for why we created the program, right? We wanted to be world class in this work, right? We wanted to make sure that our program had substance, right? Especially in a time 2020, if we remember, a lot of companies were creating diversity and inclusion programs, right? And so it was important for us that we didn't fit into, that box of companies that were just doing it to do it, right? We really wanted to make sure that people saw that we were serious about this work. So, I leaned heavily on, this is what our original mission and vision was in building this program. And we have made a lot of good progress, but now it's a good time for us to bring someone in who has a fresh set of eyes, because we've all been a part of this. I'm very fortunate that we have executive buy-in across all levels. The support was there, which has been so critical in helping us move this forward. But having a fresh set of eyes is invaluable in building out our program. And so I was able to have those types of conversations. And then I was also very clear about what we were going to get as a return on engaging with this consulting firm, right? And so I was clear about the ROI and how I could communicate the ROI, and how that ROI was going to long term feed into the strategic direction that we had outlined, and really fuel that. And so having those elements helped, right, to get that buy-in to say, okay, let's go ahead and move forward, in doing this work, and being vulnerable, if you will, right? Because as a part of the audit, we also had our executive team interviewed, right? So we interviewed our executive team to kind of score what we had done, right? And then another piece of it is interviewing, our frontline team members, right, to get their input, and so we can do a compare and contrast, right?
Yeah.
Here's where we are as an executive team and how we're scoring ourselves,
That must
and
have been
here's
quite
our frontline.
daunting.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so and so there's a level of vulnerability, right, that's there, right? And you have to be, you have to be willing to get the hard, sometimes difficult feedback, right? That says, yes, we're making progress, but we still have some work to do, right? And in my perspective, that's the goal, right? That's the goal in this, right? Is to get that negative feedback that says, hey, we've missed it this way, or I'd love for us to be doing this, or I think we need to be better at this. That's what those are the gold nuggets that
Yeah.
I'm extracting from this experience, right? Because a lot of people, you hear the positives, and we have had great success, and it's wonderful. I'm very proud of where we are, but we know that there's more that we can be doing, right?
And I
We
think,
are an organization. Right, we're an organization of 10,000, right? So when you think about that, somewhere down the line, right, someone has some feedback for us that we can take, right, that we can apply, and so we want to get that. We want to get that feedback, and so when I was able to communicate it in that way, to remind us of why we started, right, this work, what our objectives are, and what was going to be the ROI, that came as a result of engaging this diverse firm as well. So we got some diversity spin from it, which is great. Then it sold itself. And we were able to continue to engage and evolve that relationship with that firm, because we see the value, right? And we see the value there. So that would be my advice to those that are having those difficult conversations, especially when budgets are always a thing,
yeah.
right, that we have to be mindful of. All
Mm.
right, that would certainly be my way of guiding you through that process.
No, that sounds fantastic. And for any of the leaders that are located around the area that you guys are you able to share the firm that you have used that have really helped you along your journey?
Yes, yes. So we engaged the Kaleidoscope Group, and they are based in Chicago, Illinois, but they have a global presence. So yeah, they're assisting us, in our journey, and so very good team of people who come in. Really get an understanding of your company, spend time with your team members, and we have a dedicated team, if you will, that's helping us, and really going through this journey. So we're not, with some consulting firms, you see different faces each time you're engaging. It's like we have a dedicated team we've built relationships with. They know us, right? They know our leadership team. And so it's just been a really rewarding experience for us.
Ciara, honestly, I think all the nuggets that you've shared so far, like it's just been really amazing. And now we're talking about, you guys have done your review, you're looking towards the future now. You've got this wonderful team behind you to help support you on your journey. So what do you foresee for the future in DEI? Like what do you think is on the horizon?
I think we are at a time where training is so critical. And I say that because I think some of what we're seeing with the criticism around diversity, equity, and inclusion comes from just a lack of awareness and education around what it really is,
Yeah.
right? I really believe that. And so for me, what I think is paramount in doing this work and making sure that it has longevity, is around training, that and education, to talk about these topics. Right. We talk about diversity, and we talked about how this is continuing to evolve. right? It's not just race and gender anymore, right? There's so many more elements to it. And just when you think you have it all together, right? There's a new, spectrum of diversity that you have to learn, and that's beautiful. I think that's the beauty of diversity, right? But the other piece of this, I think, is when we're talking about how to, show up and advocate for these different elements of diversity, these different groups, diverse groups. I think there needs to be really more intentional education around that, because we don't know what it's like to exist in the body of someone who is different than us, or who grew up in a different culture, or we know our lived experiences, right? But sometimes without exposure, right, to others, we can think through just the lens of our lived experiences and what life has been like for us. And I think that is a disservice, right? Beyond just wanting to see diversity and inclusion thrive, just as human beings, I think it's a disservice for us to just sit inside of our own, little boxes and never challenge ourselves to see beyond, our experiences and our views of the world. And so I am advocating strongly that we continue to prioritize education and training, that we also challenge ourselves to talk about the difficult topics as well, because that, I think, is, a lot of companies are nervous right now, right, to have these difficult conversations, but we need to have the difficult conversations, because it impacts how people show up to work every day. When we think about where we are in our economy, and with inflation, and and this idea of people being able to make a living wage and take care of their families, and when they are burdened with those types of experiences where they're not able to make ends meet, they bring that stress into the workplace, right? And psychological safety becomes really important, right? And those types of instances. So we have to talk about psychological safety. We have to talk about, these very heavy topics, right, that are going to impact how people show up every day and how productive they are in the roles that they hold within our organizations. So it behooves us as as organizations to have the conversations, to create the safe spaces for dialogue, and to listen for what we can be doing to make the journey easier, right? And I think that coupled with what I mentioned earlier, where I'm encouraging people to also extend grace, right? As companies are trying to figure it out, especially give grace, because we're gonna miss the mark sometimes, right? And we will absolutely need time to make some of these changes, to change behaviors, right? And all of what that represents. It takes time. And so on the other side of that, I encourage individuals, especially if your company is going on this journey, to be understanding, and to give grace to these companies that are doing this work, with intentionality, with that level of accountability, that are just like, I want to do it right, but I don't know how to do it. But I commend any company right now that's saying, we're still prioritizing this, we're going to do it because it's important. And for us, our view is that this work is so important. We have seen how it has helped us become a better organization. So we are fully committed to continuing the work that we're doing. But we have stepped back and really started to build out an education roadmap. That's our new initiative right now, is really building out an education roadmap, so that we have a library of resources that we can train all of our team members on, and then start looking at how does it change how they lead once they apply the knowledge that we've given them, right? And start to really unpack some of that data, so that we can continue to evolve that. But that is where our focus lies as we look ahead.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Ciara, for joining me today on the show and sharing with our listeners and with me all of the great work that Diversified Maintenance and yourself has been up to, how you've gotten on along the journey so far, and what's to come. I'm so excited. I'm so thrilled that we have leaders like yourself that are in positions that can really make some impactful change and really change lives. So thank you so much. For all those that are listening, if they're wanting to learn a little bit more about you and to connect with you and the work that you're doing, how can they do that?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Ciara Lilly, Ciara Lilly, because I know there's a lot of spellings of Sierra out there. So I always like to just share that. And then, of course, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to have conversations. If you're, early in your stages of building your program, if you're at a crossroad with your program, I believe in collaboration. And so if I can be of service and helping in any way, I encourage anyone who's interested to reach out and we can schedule some time to chat.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, once again, Sierra, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate you and can't wait to speak to you again soon.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. This has been great.